You know that one of the topics that gets everyone interested in holding conversations is anything that touches the pocket. And something seems to have a pin or a magnet with which it takes money out of your pocket or keeps money from getting to your pocket. And that one is electricity. And that's what we want to talk about this morning. You remember, of course, that the federal government gave that target that within October and December last year, let's target 1 million meters all across the nation, across the 11 distribution companies, DISCOs as we call them. And it's supposed to affect something in the region of 25 million households all across the nation. How far so far? Well, let's begin that conversation. But just to first of all notify you that from information available even from the NERC, only 525,120 meters have been distributed in the past 2 years. How many were distributed between October and December last year? A little over 18,000. What's the reason for all of this? Let's begin the conversation this morning. We have with us the Executive Director, Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, ANED, Sunday Odoto. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, this is one of several things that's affected. Of course, I want to assume that you're as concerned as many people are about this issue. First of all, let's talk about the fact that we weren't able to meet that target of 1 million meters across the 11 discos all over Nigeria. What happened?
Okay. Let me start first with a very sincere apologies to Nigerians, because when you have expectation and your expectations are not met, you have every right to be concerned, you have every right to be angry. The situation, I think we just need to put it in content for everybody to understand what happened. First of all, the current situation, which is even worldwide, the pandemic has a lot of role to play. It has a lot of impact on the situation. But let me start with how we got to where we are now.
Well, you know, just a quick one.
Yes.
While factoring that in, the
Yes.
pandemic in,
Yes.
don't forget that that pledge was made within the pandemic.
Yes.
October last year it was supposed
Yes.
to start, and December was supposed to.
Yes.
We were supposed to have distributed the 1 millionth meter across
Yes.
Nigeria. I believe that the pandemic was factored in.
That was the plan. But nobody could even foresee what has happened, even in terms of the impact of the pandemic. In the last 2 months, what we have had worldwide, the second wave is even worse than the first one. But let me leave the pandemic aside. First, let us look at the whole thing critically well. With the government first, I think we need to commend the federal government for that initiative in the first place, which is to ensure that every single household in Nigeria is metered. And to that extent, between the federal government and all stakeholders, the regulator, our investors, and all the operators, there are a lot of commitments and agreements. There are a lot of discussion behind the curtain to ensure that this is achieved. And there are a lot of things that goes with it. But number one, this is an initiative that was also meant to create about 3 benefits for Nigerians. Number one, it was planned that doing this through our local meter manufacturers will strengthen the local manufacturers. Number two, it will also create jobs. And of course, number three, it is also aimed at sustaining the economy. Unlike in the past, when what will happen will be for the procurement of meter from abroad, the importer will just go and buy and then bring it to the country. Now, what they are trying to do is to ensure that we get these local meter manufacturers to make meters available And in the next 3 years, as much as 7 million meters. But what has happened is that there are a lot of issues with logistics. And some of these things, I'm happy you mentioned that we've done over 500,000.
In 2 years?
In 2 years, yes. Meters are not things that you just plug in, just procure and plug in. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of logistics. And it is not as easy as a lot of people think. This is not like buying a mobile phone and then slotting in the SIM card. And we're not giving excuses. All we're asking for is, one, for us to be patient with the government, knowing their good intention, for us to show understanding with the regulators and the operators. And I'm sure the meter manufacturers themselves, they will tell you the challenges that come with this thing.
Well, maybe
even the issue of funding.
Maybe we should actually listen to the meter manufacturers. Kola Balogun also joins us this morning virtually. He is Managing Director and Chief Executive of Momas. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, the expectations were high. 1 million meters, that's a lot of meters, and that's a lot of business. So Mr. Odunton has tried to offer some explanation from the DISCO side. What would it be from the manufacturer's side?
Thank you very much, Ayo. Good morning, Nigeria. Actually, we need to commend federal government for this quick intervention on deployment of meter to bridge the metering gap in the country. However, if you recall, there was a scheme that was going on across the country called Meter Asset Provider, which needed to be rounded up before we start implementing the national mass rollout. So a couple of the DISCO who have been paid for meter asset provider needed to tidy up those ends so that the new meter, which is supposedly to be free from the federal government, will come in. So between October and November, that's what most of the DISCOs are rounding up. However, there was inventory taken by the regulator from all the meter manufacturers that what did you have in stock so that the federal government will pay for it and they will be able to deploy it to the consumer. I haven't realized that some of us has to go extra mile to ensure that this mass metering is successful. We have to train lots of Nigeria across the country so that as we are delivering new meters, we will be able to install along the processes. However, from the meter manufacturer, I declare 10,000 in stock, and I've delivered all the 10,000 to all the DISCOs. Others have declared some quantity. If they have delivered or not, that's another thing. But however, considering the process of acquiring or procuring raw materials and components across the globe, because of this pandemic, we could not meet up because it affected the entire logistics, coupled with clearing process at the port. All those things affected some of the 1 million targets the federal government had in mind between October and December. So those are the logistic constraints we have as a manufacturer. But we practically double the entire process to ensure that this scheme is a successful scheme. From my own hand, we keep delivering little bit of data and they keep funding us. But we need sufficient funding to be able to buy components ahead, knowing fully that globally there is a constraint in terms of procuring raw materials and components for the manufacturing generally. It's not peculiar to metering. It's just the global pandemic that affects the logistics of getting components across the country. And that's where we need to actually plead with the system generally, including consumer, to bear it in mind that it will delay, but definitely the scheme is ongoing. And the whole idea is that it's not going to even stop at 1 million meters. The intention is that to close down the entire metering, which is supposed to be 6 million along the line. And that will take us some few years. And we use this opportunity to now develop further capability and expand all the capacity we have to be able to give more values in terms of employment, in terms of technology transfer, and so on and so forth. Those are the things we are trying to play around, and we are on it, and we are in the middle of it. Because of this,
Mr. Balogun, there are a good number of people who have so many questions right now. Data from NERC, if we can just show you this image that we cropped from the NERC report that talks about the number of people that have been metered over the past 2 years, between October, that's right there, between October 2019 and October, last year. I mean, it would seem like we weren't even, there wasn't any plan really. That's the way it would look. That all of these things that you have talked about, the shortcomings, first of all, there was, if you look at it, it's the combined MAP and NMMP meter deployment status. That means the previous program wasn't fast enough. And then this new one was supposed to expedite action. The mass meter asset provider or meter asset program was running before the NMMP program, came on, and people are wondering if a state of emergency, so to speak, was declared and it was supposed to produce something as expeditiously as possible, and it is not. Mr. Oduton, you would agree that people would have a lot of concerns. But before, I'm pretty sure that Akwa will also have her own questions for you as well. But looking at all of this, it doesn't just add up. You're pleading for time. You're pleading for understanding. But don't also forget that this NMMP program is part of a much bigger program, the Economic Sustainability Plan of the federal government. So if that one is being slowed down, he's saying that, they're doing everything that they can. But between October and December, 18,000 out of 1 million meters all across Nigeria, that is most certainly pitiable.
Okay, let me again emphasize the reality that we have in this country. I think when we talk about manufacturing any product, you have to look at the components. You have to ask yourself the question.
He referenced my apologies, Mr. Yes. He referenced the issue of funding, but it is for the meter manufacturers to provide the meters for the discos. What's the end? What's the end of this stake, as far as the discos is concerned?
Well, for us as discos, it is in our interest for every consumer to be metered, because our studies have shown that wherever we meter people, there's less argument. But he also mentioned a critical point that I think we all need to, when we're asking for understanding, we're not just asking for understanding, we're asking for understanding so that people will understand how the system works. He mentioned something that is important, which is, he mentioned the issue of components. And let me explain that so that people can understand that. Basically, to manufacture a meter in Nigeria, we cannot, in this country, as at yet, we cannot manufacture all the components required for a meter to be a complete meter. So they still have to import some of the components. And why is that? Simple, because Ajaokuta is yet to come fully on stream. If we have Ajaokuta on stream, they will not need to go and import any other thing. So those things that they have to import, it is a simple thing. Everybody knows that. Across the world, getting cargo across the borders has become more and more difficult because of the pandemic. And we all know the way this thing is. So if they don't have the components, they cannot complete the process of manufacturing the meters. That is even a bigger problem. Now, same with the funding. What the federal government had done was to facilitate the funding, and those fundings comes as a loan on the book of the discos for there to be metered. The good news for the customers is that there's no upfront payment. So that's why you hear this thing is free. They don't have to pay for it to get it. But the issue of sufficiency, having enough number of meters, has to do with the issue of availability. The issue of availability has to do with the issue of manufacturing. The issue of manufacturing has to do with the issue of importation. Forex is there. Pandemic is there. There's no way you can perform any magic within 3 months when we have those things in place. But let us commend the government. For once, for them to have even thought about the initiative, it is so easy. Talk is cheap. We can sit down and criticize every day, but let us see the process
Mr.
and let us ensure it happens.
Mr. Oduston, you would agree with me that it's only he who feels it that knows it. You're asking for patience. Mr. Balogun is also asking for understanding. Okay, Nnamani Alexander, for instance, says, as many people watching us, or maybe we'll be watching this broadcast later, that I applied for paying the fees. I applied after paying the fees, but for the past 5 months, it's been one story to another. The cost of going from one office to another just to inquire the reasons for the delay is almost getting close to the amount I paid. Yet, I get estimated bills that keeps increasing.
Okay, it is still the same point. The reality is that those things are not available for the number of people that require it. Okay?
But
And
why
when you
ask
talk,
them
when
to
you talk
pay?
about estimated
Why
bill,
ask them to pay when the materials, the facilities are not on ground? Because don't
They
also
are-
forget that this is a second program. The
Yes.
NMMP is the second program.
Yes.
Those who paid on the previous program,
Yes.
they haven't received the
those
meters
who
either.
paid on the previous program were meant to get their meters first as soon as it is available. And let me also say that I started with apology because I know that not all those who are supposed to have gotten their meter have gotten it. But that is not to say that some people haven't got their meters. That Engineer Balogun just mentioned how many meters were supplied by his company. But the truth of the matter is that, like the Yoruba people say, when they say, ó máa kàn yín, wọn ò tí ì pè yín. Tó bá kàn yín, wọ́n sì máa pè yín. Until it is your turn, until it gets to you, we know you will not be satisfied. It is natural, okay? What we are saying is that the process of procuring the components from abroad, then manufacturing the meters, then the installation of meters, these are not, it's not something that is very easy in terms of the capacity that we have within the country. But the good side of all of this, for instance, Engineer Balogun, that is Momas. Momas has trained so many Nigerians in the last 6 months on meter installation. That is job creation. Those are the good side of this thing. But the moment the federal government decides to strengthen the local manufacturers, of course, we should expect that if they have to import things, then the issue of funding, getting things in place, the forex, these are all the things that combine together. Okay. We are not just giving excuses. Okay. We are not saying it is perfect. We are not saying that's what we should have. We are saying that we all need to be more patient. We all need to see what is good when it is good, other than looking at everything and thinking we can perform magic.
Okay,
no miracle.
Mr. Balogun, let's just be clear. He has also alluded to a number of things that you mentioned, but let's just be clear. You have raised the issue of difficulty of importation as a result of COVID-19. Is there a funding problem, and whose responsibility is it to provide these funds specifically? Because if you say federal government, that's like maybe like 2,000 or 5,000 ministries, departments, and agencies. So who specifically, if there's a funding issue?
Yes, because of this presidential intervention, the funding arrangements has been made through the central bank. The central bank, they've started funding us. It's just that we need an accelerated funding so that we can procure more components in anticipation of the volume we are talking about. What the federal government and the regulators are doing this time around is really commendable, because if we can give a little space of time, but has to be monitored, is that we should allow this service improvement tariff to come in place. Because even if we have meter in the consumer premises, that has not guaranteed 24/7 power. With this service improvement tariff, each of the DISCO will be able to enhance their infrastructure to complement this metering scheme, such that consumer will now have 20 hours, 3 hours, 22 hours, 24 hours supply into their domain. So everything has to go in line, because as we are deploying meter, because the meter will keep coming, because the federal government keep funding it. We are targeting 6 million or 1 million in a short run, 6 million at the long run. It has to continue, the funding has to continue. The DISCO has agreed that they're going to be the obligor for the loan given to them through the CBN. And the CBN has insisted that all this effort has to be channeled through development of capability so that we can create job for the country. So the money is coming through the various MAP, licensee, and the manufacturer. And this is the reason why every one of us is on our toe to bring in more component by whatever means it requires. We have to start scouting for components to ensure that this target is met. However, it is also good to complement that effort by the DISCO to enhance all their infrastructure so that by the time we are having 100% battery, for instance, consumer will so be happy to ensure that the power is there. Because it's a different thing for you to have meter in your domain, but you don't have power. So, but what will make efficiency along an entire value chain is this service improvement tariff, such that it will encourage the DISCO to upgrade all their infrastructure, enhance all their substations so that there can be uninterrupted power into their consumer premises. And this service level improvement tariff, if I may explain, it will equally ginger a mixed grid into the network, because as soon as you enhance your infrastructure, one way or the other, you can plug in some other form of off-grid power that will guarantee 24/7. So these are things we need to encourage the entire sector player to ensure that this is consistent, such that everybody will have 24/7, and then the demand side load management will not come in, so that once you know that you have meter in your house, for instance, you have power in your house 24/7, you don't need to switch on all your appliances. You cannot plan your load management within your premises or within your household. These are good things that is on the way, but we need to keep our eyes on it such that we can have good reference at the end of the scheme. 1 year, I'm sure between 1 year, we'll start seeing some references that we can point out to some area where light has been improved. They have 22-hour supply and so on and so forth. But we need, all the stakeholders need to allow certain things to happen for us to have a good reference in the country. Thank you.
I'm just curious. I mean, are you talking about another increment in tariffs? Because, service improvement tariff, isn't it already included in the current tariff? But I'm going to lump that with another question, which is what a number of Abuja residents are going through. Interestingly, in the report, in the meter deployment status, Abuja seems to have the highest here. They have installed so far 158,894 meters in Abuja, which is many times over, well, the next closest one is Ikeja. But, Ikeja is higher than Abuja, but Abuja is far, far higher than the next person after them. Just wondering, in Abuja, a lot of customers have experienced a situation where they're called to say, hey, we're coming to your residence, we're coming to change your meter from the one that you currently use, we don't know whether it is old or if it's new, to another particular meter. Now, people are wondering, a lot of people are clamoring for new meters, people who have not had any meter whatsoever, no prepaid meter, and here you are saying you want to come and change the one that is in our residence. What precisely is informing that? I don't know if Mr. Odunton can answer that, or yes, or the MD of Momas.
Okay, thank you very much, Malpe. Meters are instruments of measurement to measure consumption. Meters also have their lifespan. So when Abuja Disco announced that they were going to take some meters away and replace them, they are talking about obsolete meters. Any meter that is over 10 years old is no more a meter. It's just a box there because it will not work properly. That's just a simple answer to that. There's nothing like taking it for 1 meter. Nobody will take a new meter and swap it for anything, but we want to ensure that your meters are working correctly. And the issue of metering is still about the issue of population vis-a-vis what the population requires. A country of over 200 million people, we have more than 32 million households. So the meters that we need are more than 10 million as at this morning. So gradually the gap will be closed. It's a matter of time. I'm not saying it is fast enough, but I've spoken about Ajaokuta. Anybody who understands what that means should be able to get what I'm trying to say. Unless and until we get to that point, no miracle can come from heaven. We can pray from tonight to tomorrow morning. to have this thing, let us put other things in place. And Engineer Balogun said something, every stakeholder that are involved in anything that will bring progress to the country should do the right thing. Everybody, across the board, we all have roles to play. Even the consumers have roles to play. He mentioned the issue of tariff. I align myself 100% with all that he said. I don't need to add to it.
Odunton,
The only
hear
point,
me, changing those meters, because some people will argue that, they're still working, they're still paying their bills through those meters. They're still getting charged. In fact, they have also experienced the increments that we've seen, the slight increment, even though they say there's no increment. But it's been a reduction in tariff. So if you buy 20,000 naira, it used to give you 479, now you're getting just about 400 on your meter. They're paying something. People are asking for something so that they can also be metered in some way. What is going on? Why are those people who already have prepaid meters the priority?
well, we are not saying those ones who already have prepaid meter are the priority. We are saying that if we are doing mass meter rollout cluster by cluster, and I get to my parents' house, and your meter is 11 years old, your meter is as bad as the other neighbor who has no meter. And these are few people.
Yes. No, it's not just few.
Not even,
no, Mr.
yes.
Duto, it's not few. We'll show you some other information,
Yes.
that will buttress the fact that what she's raising is actually quite significant. But that will be after this break. Just stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Still about electricity and prepaid meters. Our guests are still with us. But, Mr. Odinson, you were talking, about some things the other time. Of course, something that Engineer Balogun also mentioned. But let me show you this data from PwC, this information from PwC with data from the NERC. That talks about the fact that 50% of currently installed meters are obsolete or faulty. 50%. Mm-hmm. As at 2017, only 18.4% of households are on any disco network.
Yes.
Now, metering is based on metered, that's the data available, is based on identified customers, which are 4.09 million, according to this data, customers with obsolete meters, up to 1.7 million. And then there are those who are unidentified or disconnected customers that run up to 33.1 million. Can you validate or?
Oh, yes, that's what it is. Let me start with the unidentified customers. We're talking about customers who are connected to the network but not known to the discos. Of course, we've been able to get more people into the dragnet in the last 7 years through various stages of enumeration across the country. So for those that are not known, that's a problem, and what we try to do every day is to identify them and then bring them on board and get them captured. The 1.7 million customers are the one I was saying, once the meters are obsolete or faulty, the right thing to do is to replace the meters. And that's what I was trying to tell Mark, that we will not go and remove a functioning perfect meter. I use the word perfect. Just because your meter is reading doesn't make it perfect. We will not go and remove that and give you a new one when there are people in the neighborhood that still need meter who are on estimated billing. And by the way, let me repeat, and I've said this many times, we are not interested in estimated billing. And let me say it again, because I know, unfortunately, people seem to have this mindset. Oh, they want that. Wherever we put prepaid meters in this country, there is always what we call revenue assurance. And you won't hear any argument. The only problem we have with those ones is as many as 47% of prepaid meters are bypassed. That's another problem. That's the issue of theft, energy theft. Again, we deal with that as it occurs, as we can see. But to talk about estimated billing on its own is evil, because it comes in two ways, overbilling and underbilling. only on few occasions that you find it to be relatively accurate. So it is when it is over billing that we call it crazy billings. Not all bills are crazy. The ones that are underbilled, they will not complain. We don't want that. We want meters. And I've spoken about the issue of availability. The moment we are able to manufacture all components in this country, nobody will be talking about forex. Nobody will be talking about numbers.
We'll go back to Markwe after now, but Victor always saying this. Let's be clear. It is the law that once you pay for the meters, the disco has no right to bring bills again until they supply your meter. He says it is the law. Why are they still sending estimated bills to that man who paid for a meter?
Well, I can tell you for a fact that if there are cases where people find errors in the process or in the system, you have every right to complain, and I can assure you that such errors will be corrected. It is very easy in this system, as we have it, for there to be mistakes. And mistakes do happen, okay? So the issue of estimated billing or the issue of people paying for meters and not getting it, the issue of payment and not getting it has to do with what Engineer Balogun and I have been talking about. And there's no point repeating that. But the point that people need to understand is that we all need to be patient and wait, because this process or this industry, as we have it today, since 2013, when it was privatized, people need to understand that it is a journey. It's a very long journey. The reform process is a long journey, and we're not there yet. And that's why we do not pretend telling people that everything is fine. Okay. Until we get there, there will be some bumps and issues on the way. What matters most is for us to be able to respond quickly and resolve the issue. Well, and that's what we're trying to do at this school.
Well, Engineer Balogun, one of the arguments that has also come up is the variety of the meters. Some argue that, look, why don't we just have the same kinds of meters to all the discos? Maybe it'll be faster to produce the same kind of meters for all 11, discos at the same time, rather than, provide a different one for a different disco. After all, while some, compare what happens in telecoms, in some segments with what happens in the electricity sector, they say that there are other aspects of the power sector that cannot be compared. This hardware thing, for instance, why can't we have the same kind of meter? After all, it's the same electricity.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Like what Momas asks as a question concerning replacement of some meters on consumer premises, it has to do with what you just asked now. Now, there's this energy accountability that is going on so that each of the disco can pay for their electricity on the upstream. They want to be able to pay for feeders. They want to be able to pay for each of the substations that we have. So if their substation has been metered, which means from the grid, from the feeder, the transmission or the bulk trader can pick the load and know what quantum of power that they have delivered to that substation, that transformer, for instance. And the composition of the consumer connected to that transformer are mixed match of meters, such that they are not smart. If they are not smart, there is no how you will be able to compare the load consumed by consumer as to the load the energy bill from the transformer. So they need to change all the consumer to make sure that they have uniform protocol or uniform kind of smartness to allow them to be upload the load each of the household consumed to match it with energy that they bill from the transformer, so that they will know whether there is a bypass or there is commercial losses or technical losses, and they will be able to do the needful to clean up that side. They want to ensure that each of these substation or transformer are accounted for. And for you to be able to do proper accountability along the value chain, you must meter uniformly in terms of the technology on the baseline, so that energy accountability can, because it's a different thing for you to meter the transformer, and you now meter the consumer at the other hand of various types of meter that they are not smart. Some are still using analog, some are using old electronic, some are using the old class 2 meters, because all these meters we are deploying now, they are all class 1. They are more accurate than class 2. And class 2 to the disco is energy loss or is commercial losses. So they need to change all of them to class 1 so that they will measure the same thing and they will have the same technology protocol so that they will be able to read those information to negate it with what the market operator has built them from the transformer. These are energy auditing procedure that is going on.
Sorry to interrupt you, Momas. For a lot of people, I think the issue has to do with trust. If you can hear me, it has to do with trust. Because one of the things that ought to be done when those meters are installed is to say that they have an expiry date. On so-and-so day, by this time, you know, these meters are going to expire. What you find right now is that people are saying, look, it looks like they just want our meters to read faster. If they cannot get to increase electricity tariffs, you know, publicly, then they will find a way behind it by changing meters that have been configured to read a lot faster. You also talked about service improvement bill. People are wondering, hasn't that been included? Because in the last couple of weeks, we have seen a slight increment in charges, or at least a decrease in the number of units got, despite buying the same amount for the same period. How do you respond to that? Isn't that some service improvement charge already being incorporated in what consumers are paying?
Yes, thank you, Marco. It's very important for all the stakeholders, including the consumer, to have a clear understanding of service improvement tariff. The whole idea is that, look, if you can have 24 hours power supply, there is tendency that the type of the supply process can be misgrid. And we will spend more money to ensure that the power that gets to your domain is of high quality because we have enhanced the infrastructure along that side. So people must pay extra for you to enjoy that 24 hours. And that's why I mentioned the issue of demand-side load management, because now that you have the comfort that I have power 22 hours or 24 hours, then you can switch off all our appliances in the house. Because oftentimes, people abuse electricity. They just put on the power because they are not sure of having the power all the time. So every consumer, if you have to pay a little high to have that assurance of 24 hours, it makes sense. However, if you look at the tariff structure that he put in place, there's some low-end tariff for people who cannot be guaranteed sufficient hour of supply, and they still maintain the old rates. It's only if, for instance, let me give Lekki Phase 1 as a typical example. If all of us, most of the people residing in Lekki Phase 1, they have generator in all their houses, and the inconvenience of, fueling it, sending your words to go and buy fuel and so on and so forth. And somebody can say, look, I can give you 24 hours because we have some embedded power scattering even across Lagos, which they can feed in with the grid together to guarantee that 24-hour supply. Why would I want to put on my gen? So let me pay a little bit to save pollution because the noise is there, the pollution is there. If the environmental factors are there, if all those things can be put aside by giving me 22 hours or 24 hours, I can pay a little more. These are reasons why we should allow this new structure of service improvement tariff to come in place. Anybody that doesn't want to pay that same tariff, in that structure, he has an option that I want to stay within this band. I want to have 10 hours, 6 hours of supply, and I'll pay this rate. And the system has provided sufficient technology to be able to switch that consumer into that number of hours and will be paying the old tariff. So everybody needs to be educated sufficiently because it is when we're able to pay for the upstream, pay for the generation, pay for the transmission that we will be able to have cost guarantee.
All right, Engineer Balogun, a quick one on what you just said now about everyone, needing to do the needful. Very, very quickly. So just to be clear, how soon should people look forward to getting meters? Very quickly. we're already behind time. So how soon?
If it is the 1 million issue, I'm sure before June, the 1 million will be exhausted. But for the 6 million for the entire nation to be metered, we are talking about 2 years or 3 years, as the case may be. But
All right.
that will give us improvement, every development.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. But 6 months for 1 million and 2 years, 6 million, and you say we have a deficit of 10 million. We're looking at 5 years then, right?
Well, as time goes on, I believe that within the next 5 years, all households in Nigeria should be metered. And when I talk about 10 million, we're talking about even people that are still building. We're talking about the deficit that we have, the metering gap, and the 6 million, the 7 million being planned, first the 1 million, and he has told us now that hopefully by June, that 1 million will have been done. And like I said, until you are metered, even if your next door neighbor is metered, you still have a right to be shouting no meter anywhere.
But on that, a good number of people are saying that law, which we referenced earlier, that once you have paid for a meter, you shouldn't receive any billing at all. People do not know that such a law exists. But the challenge with that would be if they are using power and the discos are supplying
free
the
of
power.
Charge.
And yes, that's what the law says, isn't it? So how respond to that?
Well, the only response I'll give you on that is that we have a regulator. The regulator will roll out the rules and the regulation for us as operators. It is not the intention of the regulator that anybody should be using electricity free of charge because it doesn't come free to the distributor. And when you talk about discos, always remember the discos are just distributors, not the owner of the product.
Don't also forget
so
that
you cannot,
we're talking about we're talking about the, Mr. Dutton, one moment. We're talking about the element of the law here. Once you have paid for a meter, you should not receive any bill. You should only be billed from that meter.
Whoever has any grievance in the process or within the system, please refer that to the regulator.
So you say that you're saying essentially that discos still bill people who have paid for meter but have not received the meter.
I've not told you
the
that.
law says that they shouldn't.
No, I'm not saying that. And people need to understand, and I'll repeat it again, the issue of how electricity gets to your home and the billing process, including the billing platform, in most cases are automated. When there's a mistake or an error, it will be corrected. It has to be corrected. And the issue of thinking about any law that will permit you to use electricity free of charge, it means that you care less about the generation companies, the gas providers. Those suppliers will not supply. Those producers will not be able to produce unless and until the products are paid for.
Well,
that is a fact. Yes. That is what we must know.
But don't also
looking
forget
for
that
loopholes will not help.
This is not a point of looking for a loophole.
It's
not looking for a loophole.
It is.
The consumer is interested in paying for the electricity, so he paid for a meter. And the law says so long as you have paid, until your meter is supplied, you should not pay any. But then, just as you said, we'll have to take this up with the NERC, which, by the way, we reached out to also be a part of this conversation. That's the NERC, who is regulating the electricity sector in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we're waiting word from them. Hopefully, we'll get word back shortly. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for your conversation with us this morning. Sunday Odutom is the Executive Director, Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, ANED, as well as Engineer Kola Balogun, who is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Momas Meter Manufacturing Company. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're back in a moment. Do stay with us.